Amaka.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the session by 12 p.m. brought to you by Top Universe. So, hi guys, welcome to the class today. If you're yet to follow us on Twitch, please go ahead and follow us on Twitch. If you're yet to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, please go ahead and do that. Now, follow us on all our social media handles. You never can tell what is coming. At least that way you're informed about what's happening. Hi, Ella. How have you been? Ella, can you hear me? Hello, Ella.
Myself, but sorry, some weird reasons. I want to. Hello, Amaka.
Yeah, I can hear you now, Ella. Yes,
okay,
I can.
I could not unmute myself. I don't know if it's my network, so apologies.
All right.
All right. Okay, I think we just have a few persons. So please, for those of us here, please drop a message on our Discord. So we'll have more persons joining. So please, for those of us already here joining live, please do that. So you have more of your colleagues that will join us. Thank you. Yeah, Maka, you can go on.
All right. So we have Mav on the call. So Mav, welcome once again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So the floor is all yours.
Yeah. So just give me 1 minute. I'll share my screen. I'm just setting things up here. All right. So guys, welcome to today's session. We'll basically cover JavaScript functions. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen. Just drop a message, so I'll be sure if you can see my screen. Just drop a message. Let's see. I'm going to share. All right. Guys, just give me 1 minute. Let's say start, please. Okay. Okay, so we are going to be discussing JavaScript, but I want to show you how to use this directly on your machine using VS Code. So I am not going to be using StackBlitz for today. I'm just going to quickly share my VS Code environment. So that is what I am doing right now. Okay. Yes. All right, I think this should work. Okay, yeah, so sorry about the delay. I believe you can see my VS Code screen right now. Please drop a message if you can see it. If you think it is too small, let me know. I would increase the resolution. Just let me know. Okay, so let's start off with JavaScript objects, right? That is the first thing we're going to be talking about today. We already started covering, the fundamentals of JavaScript. I'm sure most of us already know how to, of course, create a JavaScript file, write some basic code, create variables and all that. we're going to be talking about functions primarily, and also we'll take a quick look at objects and and arrays. So just to start off with, objects. So objects in JavaScript are basically a way to organize your data in terms of having different items come together, to stand to stand as a single entity. So I'm going to show you an example. So let's assume we have an item such as a person. Yeah, so now we have the person object. So this is referred to as the object. This is how you create, your basic object in JavaScript. So we have the person object, and we can say the person object as, the first name, right, of Marvelous, and the last name of Solomon. And then we can add even more details such as age, right? So we can say maybe 100. And, we can even have extra functions. So yeah, let me zoom in again. Please, if you're not using your laptop to view this, you don't expect this to be extremely big. All right. So try as much as possible to use your laptop when you join sessions like this. Okay, so I believe you can see this better. So we have the person object with the first name. We refer to this as the keys, right? So these are the keys and these are the values, okay? So I'm just diving straight, showing you what an object would look like. Ideally, everything in JavaScript, you would most definitely want to refer to them as, objects, but this is, the standard object, the standard way to create an object in JavaScript. So we have the person object. The person object has the key of first name and the value of Marvelous, right? So the key of first name and the value of that key is Marvelous. We have the key last name, or you can also call that the properties, right? So property, first name, last name, and then you have the value of Marvelous and Solomon. So what you can do is you can proceed to print this. So I'm just saying console.log person. So if I open up my terminal, to execute this code, I'm going to run this. Since I'm running this via VS Code, I'm going to be using Node. And I'm just going to say node main.js. I first have to go to the desktop, okay? So yeah, node main.js. So now you see we have the entire object printed out, to our terminal, right? And yeah, there are so many ways you can actually print some of these items. If you really have like a large amount of objects and you want to, visualize it in such a way that you can better, see your data, you can actually use the console.dir or console.table. Yeah, I think console.table would work best for this. So you see it will be structured this way, right? So this is basically your object, and yeah, so I think the object in itself, of course, has a lot of advantage when it comes to fetching data or working with data. So most times you would refer to items as an entity, right? So for example, we have maybe like a chair, like a table, right? So you can create a table object, with the number of legs, right? And the size of the table. So I mean, you can always put these things together, as objects, because every entity would of course have properties and values. All right. So I'm going to show you a different example right now. I'm sure you would understand this even better. So let us work with something more, I would say, realistic. So of course, the person object makes sense, but let's do something like this. I'm going to create an object, and this time around, I would call this object laptop. All right, so let's assume we have, of course, we have multiple or different types of laptops, but we just want to pick some vital properties that you can use to describe your laptop. So we can start with the make of the laptop, right? We can also add maybe the model, the year. I don't know if that's, yeah, the year, then maybe the serial number. Probably you just want to use SN for serial number. And yeah, you can also use brand. Okay, so and maybe your operating system. So let's just call that OS. So let's stop here for now. So when you look at these items, you would definitely understand that these details here would be describing the laptop, right? It's possible to even add functions, but when we discuss functions, we'll then see how we can use functions inside this object. But just take a look at this. We have a laptop item, and then you have the make of the laptop, you have the model, you have the year, you have the serial number, you have the brand, and you have the operating system. Let's fill these items in. So for the make, I would just put something random here. So I'm going to say maybe Orange OS or Orange machine. The model, I'm going to say 2022. Yeah, I can say 2022 Orange. Okay, for the year 2022, serial number. I want to just okay. So then the brand, I'll just call this Orange, and OS, I'll say Orange OS. Okay, so now this is a very simple, description of our laptop, and of course we can also go ahead to add this to our table when we when we use the console. This is also an object, right? So when we use the console object, we're basically calling these methods or this function that exists within that object. So I can simply call the laptop, right? So and if I print this, see you have those details in here. Of course, you can also use your console.log, right? Which is what most of us are familiar with. And you can access the individual properties. So I can say laptop.make. I run this, you see we have the make right here, Orange machine. I can say laptop.year. Of course, we have 2022. So you can also, so we can do something like this. Let's assume we want to have like a detailed description, just to write something more readable, right? So we can actually use we can say we have the const description. So it can be description equals. So we can start by saying I'm going to say the laptop dot make. So which is the Orange machine with model, and I can grab the model, right? So laptop dot model. So of course you can even add more description, but I'm just going to say has the serial number of, I'm going to say laptop.sn, right? So let's just stop here. So this is just me composing this string with a bunch of properties that we have within the object, right? So the laptop.make, which is the Orange machine with model. So we're going to get this exact model 2022 Orange. So you can actually put maybe like some sort of string around this, just to make it obvious that you're referring to this. Has the serial number of, so you can also add the serial number. Let's just use a star for this. So yeah, if I go ahead to print this, so I'm going to print the description. Save this. You see you have the Orange machine with the model 2022 Orange has the serial number of this. So we're able to use the object, the object properties to actually compose this string. All right. So this is a simple example of what an object would look like. Let us go one step further and add a simple function. So you can basically add a function, right, inside this object. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like, but we'll cover function again very soon. Okay. So let me check the chat. If you have any question while I'm explaining, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to add a simple function here, and when you're adding a function, you probably want to have something like get description, right? So let's just say get description. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so I think one thing I want you to understand is okay, so I think one thing I want you to understand is when you're working with a function, this is probably not the best way you would implement something, or implement this on a production level. So when I mean production, I'm referring to, if you're building a real application that is meant to go live, this would work, right? But there are also, better ways to, to do this, right? You can basically work with something called a class. And of course, you'll be taught how to work with classes in the next session. The class itself is just a better way to structure your object, right? Which means it's going to give you like a better structure. instead of having it this way, right? If I'm working with a function here, I would basically just, do this. So I can just write function, and I can say return this. I can return the whole thing you see here. Okay, so I can basically just call this dot make. I'll tell you why I am using this. Let's go ahead and call the laptop dot get description. Okay, so the reason why I am using this, and the reason why in fact, the reason why I said you should not, you should probably not use this, pattern, is because this is, of course, an old way to, work with objects, right? You probably want to have a class, where you structure this, and you don't want to type in fixed items like this, in your application. These are expected to, be dynamic, right? Except for some reasons you are, kind of like making or creating something that is meant to be static like this within your code, then of course this is not so bad. But in the real world scenario, you definitely would fetch some of these records, from some endpoint or from some other servers. Okay, so get description here is a function. Of course, it's obvious here that this is a function. That is why we have function, and a function is basically a block of code that is meant to do something specific, right? That's how we see it. It's a unit of it's a block of code that has a unit of computation. So the idea is when you run this function, this is what we expect to have. In our own case, when we run this function, we're expected to have the description, which we have returned, right? We're not using the console.log here, even though it is possible. So if I use console.log here, then I probably think I made a mistake here. Yeah, so I probably would not have to do the console.log here, right? I just have to, call this, and of course it will also print. But it's always a good idea when you're working with functions or methods to return your values so that you can then choose what to do with the returned value outside. So this is when you use console.log inside this function, it is referred to as a side effect. But we don't want side effects, so we prefer to just use the return statement. A side effect basically basically means you're doing something outside the desired functionality of that function. So when you are saying console.log, it means this is not giving you the description, it is rather printing the description. But what we want is that this should give us the description, so we have to return this and choose what we want to do with it. So that is why you see we have the console.log outside. Of course, we can also pass the return statement into a string, maybe like let results, and we can choose to print the results. Now you see why you probably want to return values instead of performing that print action. So this would also give us the same result, as you can see. Okay. All right, so this is a function, so you can play around with functions like this, and we're using this.make because we are referring to the item. So when we say this is referring to the scope, right? This is our scope right here. It's referring to the entire scope right here. Okay, so it's referring to the object scope itself. So when we say this.make, it is actually calling this make. When we say this.model, it is calling this. When we say this.sn, it is calling this. Okay. And we are using a regular function. We also have, there are some scenarios where you probably use arrow functions, right? And I'll get to explain the difference. I think that should look like this. Yeah, I'll get to talk about this when we work with functions. All right, so for now, let's just stick to this. Okay, so let's comment this out for now. And let's move on to the next thing, which is working with array before we get to function. All right, so an array is basically, please drop your questions. If you have any questions so far, drop your question in the chat. Okay, so let's talk about array. Working with an array, this is our objects. I would say JS objects. Yes, array. Okay, So an array is basically a collection of items, and when I say collection of items, I'm referring to in JavaScript it can be items with different data types. So for example, we are all aware that when you have items within this quote or even a single quote, we're referring to a string, right? So if I have an item such as maybe let's full name equals let's use Solomon Marvelous. Okay, so this is basically a string, right? Now, what if we have, multiple names inside a single item? This is when we are referring to an array. So we can have multiple names. We can have John, we have James, we can have Marv, right? We can have Solomon. So now you see we have multiple names, and yes, I can call this array of names. Names, okay. All right, so now we have this is a string, right? And this is an array because this contains multiple items. Now in JavaScript, it must not be the same type, right? We can actually have like true. We can have one. We can have 5.20. So you can actually have multiple types. You can even have like undefined, right? So you can have multiple types within the array. In the first example here, I'm going to be showing you how to use just strings. In the second example, I'll show you how to use an array with objects, yeah, so which is an array of objects, which you would actually use most of the time when you're building software, because most of the things you'll be fetching from the backend are probably an array of items, right? Kind of like a list of items, So now we have let array of names equals this. We can actually print out the arrays, right? So we can say console.log array of names. If I print this, you're going to get those names, of course, within that array, within the enclosed square brackets. We can also decide to print out, every single item in here, right? So we can say we're printing the array of names, and we can, of course, say dot for each. So we can print the entire, set of items here. I would rather take this off and just say console.log element. So let me explain what you're seeing here. I will first print this so you see what it looks like. Okay, so it says we have an error, and I think this is the error right here. So let's do that again. Okay, so just to break this down, we first declared our array of names carrying John, James, Marv, and Solomon. This is the array, and we are saying array of names dot for each. Now, for each is basically an implementation in JavaScript that would let you print out or work with the individual elements in that array. So we can choose what to do with the individual elements. For me, I'm just printing out the items, and the items here I refer to those items as elements. It can be I, right? It can be A, it can be anything, it can be items, right? So whatever you call it, it's going to remain the same, right? The same set of items. And of course, you can even choose to append, so I can say, let's do this. I can say my name is, and I can put this, just like this. Okay, so it will actually print out like my name is John, my name is John, my name is James, my name is Marv, my name is Solomon, right? Because we're just messing around with the individual item. This is the individual item right here. Now we're using this shorthand, which is the for each. Ideally, we should be using the for loop itself, right? We've already covered for loops. But if I want to use a for loop for this, then it will look different, and of course it will also look more complex. But yeah, I think it's we have to say for int I. So let's come on, not int I. So for let I, and we can say let I equals 0, and I can then say I is less than or equal to the array of names of length. So because I need to get the length, right? And then I would say I plus plus. Then we can simply just console.log array of names I, right? So I am sure this would do the same job, but let's test it to see. So now we have John, James, Marv, and yeah. So you see we have John, James, Marv, and Solomon. And of course, we can also add we can do this. So we can have, let's put that space. Okay, so I'm going to say my name is, right? And of course, I added this space here. I mean, I could just add the space in here and take this off. That would also work fine. So if I run this again, you see my name is. Now, the reason we're having this last undefined, I think is because it's going one step further. So maybe we should just say less than this. Let's run that. Yeah. So now we have John, James, Mark, and Solomon. So we said for let I equals 0, which is the initialization of our index. We want to start from 0, and I is less than the array of names dot length, because we want to get that length of the array. And then we said I plus plus, which means go one step further, which is I plus 1 plus 1. Always increment by 1, right? Always increment by 1. You can choose to increment by 2, which means it's probably going to skip some items. You can choose to increment by 3. I'm sure you have worked with the for loop. I'm not going to teach you for loop here. But what we are just doing right now is that we are printing the array of names using the regular for loop. But you can always choose to use this one, which is probably, I think this is easier to work with. If you even look at this, of course, it looks more simple to use, right? Even though it is using this behind the scene, right? It is kind of like it has like an easier interface when you're using this rather than using this. Okay, so I'm just going to comment on this for now. Now, this is how you print out single items. What if we have like an array of objects? A typical example, if you use some applications or even some websites, you see like maybe a list of courses, right? List of courses or list of list of users, stuff like that. The users will probably have like the image, the user image, the username, probably the email, and a bunch of other things. So let's assume we have a list of users. So I'm going to create, I'm going to use let users, and then I would create an array, and within that array I would have objects, right? Objects of multiple users. Okay, so all right, so let's do that. Someone is saying, to make use of the terminal output, must I have Node.js? Yeah, you should have Node.js. From my side, the screen is blurred. Please change the quality from your end. Probably switch your network provider. Okay. All right, so we have some objects here. The first object, I would just say we have the username. Maybe we have the avatar, right, which is their picture, right? So we have the avatar, we have the username, and we also have let's put one item, the name, right? We have the name, and yeah, the email. Okay, so this is pretty much good. So we can simply say John Doe at Gmail, or just at email.com. The name is John Doe. Okay, the username can be John Doe 112, and the avatar. The avatar is basically going to be like a link to some image, right? We don't have any link, so let's take this off. So let's stick to these three, properties: username, name, and the email. So we can actually duplicate this because we want to have like multiple items. So I'm simply duplicating this into let's just use 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we can change some of the details here. So the first one was John Doe. The next one will be Mary Doe. Let's see, Mary Doe. Okay, and of course Mary. Okay, so the other one here can be Tina Doe. Tina. And the other one here, Tina Doe. Okay, so this is just like a bunch of dummy data, and we have 3 objects inside this array. So what can you really do with the objects inside this array? Let's assume you want to print these items. Of course, that's a simple one, right? You can just say console the table equals yeah, let's see, no, not equals, sorry. So the table users, right? I'm sure that was users, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take this off first, comment on that. Okay, so it was actually users, that's correct. So if I print out this item, you see now we have all the items with their index. So this is John Doe, this is his name, this is the email, so Mary Doe, just like that, and also Tina Doe. So yeah, this looks okay. We have the username, the name, and the email. What if we just want to print, we just want to print their names, right? Now, before we do that, I want you to understand that this is the index. Every single item within an array has indexes, like 0, 1, 2. Array the index would always start from 0. So if I want to print only the item of John Doe, all I have to do is call that position, which is users with a square bracket. I'm pointing at 0, right? So if I run this again in the terminal, it gives me only the property for John Doe. If I do that of 1 like this, it gives me the property of Mary Doe, right? And if I say 2, it gives me the properties of Tina Doe, which is the third item. All right. So this is how you just grab one item from the array of items. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is to, basically print out every item, but of course this time through a for each loop. Okay. So I'm going to say users dot for each. I'm simply going to call these, items, right? So I would then say console.log items. Now this is of course going to do something very similar to what we've done, but it's basically going to print them individually. Yeah, I mean it's looking similar to when we print the whole array, but the only difference is that these items are printed independently, right? So they're not together anymore. But we can simply use if we use console.table, of course, it's also going to show that these items are separate. Now you can see that they are separated. Okay. Now that's the point. I want you to understand that they are separate. They are no longer together. What can you do after separating these items? Just to show you, a very simple example here. We can say we want to calculate all the tax, for their salary. So let's assume each and every one of these, guys. Let's change this to like employees, right? So now they are employees with the S, okay? And we are basically going to, calculate their salary, their tax, right? So we will take the salary value from here, and the salary itself is maybe 500k. Remember to put the comma here, okay? So this is for. Let's see. Oh yeah, you don't put a comma here. You can use underscore. All right, so this is for John Doe, and we can also use maybe like 400k here, and we can use maybe 600k right here. Okay, so now we have different salary, for our employees. We can switch things up here. Now let's first, get the salaries, right? So we're going to say items dot salary. Now this would just, print out the salaries, of course, right? So we are collecting the salary from individual item, from each item, we're grabbing that salary. What can we do with the salary? We want to calculate for tax. So let's just say we want to calculate for tax, and that is if I am good in math to remember the formula. So we are just going to use the salary itself, right? And we're going to multiply that by 10. Let's just assume this is what we're going to use for our formula. Okay, so this is what we're going to use for our formula. But when we're printing this, we want to say the username or the name, right? So for example, Tina Doe's tax would be, and would have that value. So, just to get things straight here. So this is what we're going to say. The result is going to be equals the items dot name, which is the name of that person. So let's do this. Item dot name, and we're going to have the apostrophe S. So for example, John Doe's, right? John Doe's tax would be, and then you have the tax itself, right? So you're going to have the tax itself, and the tax is going to be gotten from the items dot salary, multiplied by 10 and divided by 100. Okay, so the tax would be tax. Okay, so I'm going to explain this one more time. Now this is the formula we're using. We're calculating for tax, and our formula would be the salary, right, which is items of salary. You have to multiply that by 10 and then divide it by 100. So of course you can choose to pass int. I'm sure we have something called pass int, just to verify that the salary itself, just in case if it's a string, we just convert this into integer, right, or into a number. So we're saying pass int. We're grabbing the salary value here, multiplying it by 10 and dividing that by 100, and the result would be the name, which is like John Doe or John Doe's tax would be the value of the tax. Okay, so and then we're going to say console.log. Let's switch things up here to console.log, and we're going to log the results. Okay, so let's test this to see what we have. Now, if I run this, it tells us, John Doe's tax would be, this is 50,000, Mary Doe's tax would be 40,000, and Tina Doe's tax would be 60,000. So this is just a very simple, idea of what you can do with an array of objects, right? But you can do even more, right? Depending on the use case. So long you have the items coming in as an array, it means you can actually perform computation. You can actually perform some computation on these items, and there are so many ways to access this. You can use a map, but we'll definitely work with that later in the future. We'll use map and some basic built-in functionalities, such as map, as I just mentioned, and we also have reduce. There are others we can also use. So we'll definitely play around with that and see how we can build something around working with arrays and objects. All right, so this is just the example that I will be giving you here. The next thing we'll dive into would be a function, right? So we're going to be working with a function right now. Let's put JavaScript functions. But I'll be taking some questions in the chat, so if you have any question, please drop it in the chat. I think your attendance will be shared very soon. So someone is asking if you forget to add the square brackets, will it still print? So I don't know if I understand what you mean by, when you say forget to add the square brackets, at what point are you referring to exactly? Were you referring to the function, the for loop thing here? Let me see the time for that. That was 12:37. Okay, that was 12:32. Please let me know, Mr. Hayes, if you are referring to this item right here, or if you are referring to, let's see, what might you be referring to? Were you referring to like when I did the console.log, the employees with the item of 0? Is this what you were trying to? Is this what you're asking? I don't know if you're still on the call, but now if this is what you're asking, and if you're saying if you're printing this, if it would work, right? If this is what you mean, we can of course test that, and of course it would print that, but it will print the whole thing, right? So it will print the whole thing, including the array object, because you're just printing the entire array. All right. Oh, okay. Okay, Chika. Okay. Yeah. So if you're using this, then it's going to print the entire array. If you're referring to using something like .0, .1, or .2, then of course, no, you can't do that here. You actually have to access individual index like this. Yeah. So I hope you understand that. Okay. So let's do this again. I'm going to console.log the result because we don't want that to print when we start working with functions. So let's see. Did I see another message here? Is the item a string? Why did you use pass in place? Oh yeah. I was just saying, just in case you have like a string value here. So it's not a string. In this case, it's a number, right? Which means even if I don't use this, it would work perfectly. But I'm just showing you that because most times you are not sure how the data would come in, and you writing this function, you know very well that if this is not an int, then it will definitely throw some error, right? So you probably want to pass it as an int. But of course, everything would not pass as an int. I mean, if you have an alphabet right inside the number and you try to pass it as an int, it will definitely it won't work, right? So I'm just showing you, because this might look like this. If it looks like this, this would definitely have some problems. So you want to pass it as an int first before you call it. Okay, so this would work without a pass int. I was just using that to show you what you could do if you want to convert the maybe it came in as a string value, you want to convert it into an integer or a number. Okay, so let's see. All right, so we don't have any other question. For your attendance link, I'm sure it would come in soon, probably before the end of the session. All right, so let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next. I'm just going to take this off. I'll say using formula. Okay. So when we talk about JavaScript function, I already said it's a unit of computation, right? And of course, this is one of the earliest definition I have. I think I learned about. I actually described it this way, probably when I started, programming. For a very long time, when I was learning how to use VB. I think it was VB scripts. So we call it a unit of computation because the idea is you are able to, arrange a set of, a code into a single block, and when you execute that block, right, which is that function, you are expected to have a specific result, right? I mean, that is the idea. You want to have, what the result would look like. um, a lot of people make mistakes of adding so many things into a function. They want a function to fetch some record from database. They want that same function to collect that record and transform it into some type of data. They also want that same function, after transforming it to some kind of data, they want to probably even make a request to an API, right? Get some feedback from the API, then before sending that result back to the user, or even printing something from that same function. Now, would that work? Yes, of course it would work. Now, does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. I think when you're working with a function, you should follow through with that ideology that a function is a unit of computation, which means if I want to perform four different operations, then it's best if I have four different functions that are then chained together with some pattern, or probably called one after the other. So you can call the first one, pass the result to the second one, just like that. I mean, it makes sense when somebody read through your code, they understand that this function does this function does that. And at the end of the day, I want to use all the data. So I have to pass one function into the other, right? So the result will be used inside the other function. And of course, I would show you an example right now. So let's assume we want to write a function, and the functionality should simply be to um, to add two numbers, right? I mean, very basic, right? So a function to add two numbers. So I'm going to call this function let's say sum. And this is one way you can write a function. Another way to write a function, which is what you saw within that object. You saw the we can say we have like an object called arithmetic, right? So this is an object, and then within arithmetic, yeah. So within this, we can have like sum, right? So we can have like products, another function. Of course, if you want to add two numbers here, you can actually say a comma b. But you can do something similar, So this is just your function within an object, but let us stick to this style, right? So we can also have like another function. This is the regular function. So we'll call this the regular style of writing function. So the regular function. Then we have what we call the arrow function. We can have like const sum. Let's use product here. Const product equals this. Okay, and then we have maybe a comma b. So yeah, so here we also have like a comma b. Come on. So b. Okay. I don't know. This space is not necessary, right? I mean, it can look like this. For some weird reasons, I think I just want to put in that space. Okay, so we have the regular function, and then we also have the arrow function. Of course, there are some differences on how you can use them. I will definitely talk about it. Definitely explain that. Okay, so now we have a function to add two numbers. I can simply return a plus b, right? Because we're adding two numbers here. And for the product, I can simply return a times b. Okay, so one thing is a lot of people use arrow functions this way. So I'm just going to show you. Some people would probably use arrow functions this way, because if you want to perform a very simple computation, on a single line, arrow functions is actually good, right? You see, it's actually short. You don't need to put in all this stuff, right? So this is a very good way to have a function, and I can simply call this. I can call the product. I can pass in like a 2, 2, so 2, 2. So if I run this, we're definitely going to see 4, right? And this is actually working with the function. So this is the function, right? We're using an arrow function, and we just have like our return value directly, added here. So quite simple and straightforward. As a matter of fact, you can even add more, operations like working with map, and you can probably grab like an array, right? You can take an array item. So you see, when you think about, the complexity, you can then start, implementing something. So we can grab this item, and then we can simply say maybe array item dot for each. Hopefully, I can do this on a single line. So I'm going to say item, and then I am also going to do this, right? So let's see if that makes sense. And I can simply say return item times 2. Okay, so what am I doing here? It's a single line. This doesn't make any sense. So I mean, it would work. So the idea is if I have an array of items like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I choose to print this, what are you going to have? So okay, let's see. This says undefined, right? I want to figure out why do we have undefined. So we are taking the array item, and on the next line here, we basically collected the array item, and we said for each item, right? And then we returned. So we are actually returning this item by saying, okay, so console.log item. Can I take this off? Yeah, I can. Well, basically, what we're trying to do, and I'm sure I am probably making some mistake. Yeah. So you see what we have. We're able to multiply every single item in here. By simply just we just multiplied it by 2. Everything in a single line. It might look. You might be saying, "Oh, this is possible. This is cool." Yeah, it might look cool, but please don't do this because I feel this is going to complicate things unnecessarily, right? I would rather do the regular for loop, which is easy for anybody looking at your code to understand, right? Than to do this. You can even do more than this, right? You can even have like a longer line. Don't do that. No matter what you're trying to do, don't show off with this is bad. I mean, this is going to be stressful for developers to understand. If you have like 10 occurrence of code like this in your project, you're going to, instead of having developers read and understand your code, you're going to have developers read and think about what you have done, probably try to understand what you've done. So except for some basic scenario where the entire team might agree to this, but I don't think you should do something like this, even though it is possible, right? Rather have your braces, and also ensure that you have some space in here, right? This makes more sense. Okay, so write a code like this instead of having everything chunked into a single line. Okay, so yeah, so this is us working with an arrow function. And if we're calling this, it's also going to be similar. I can comment on this first. So I can call the sum, and basically add 2 numbers, 2, 2. Remember to log this. This is, basically how you work with a function. Come on, run this. So we have 4, right? So this is basically how you would work with a function, because you want this to be clear, right? You want this to be clear and understandable. It's also very good to have comments, describing your functions. You can have a single line comment. Of course, you can also put in a double line comment or multi-line comment, just to explain what your function does. But I think you should learn to also use, the arguments or the parameters. So basically, what are these arguments you're seeing here? All right, I'm going to explain that. Before I explain that, let me first show you something. It is possible. There's something called, I want to be sure, how do you fetch your arguments? So definitely this is wrong. So I don't know if I should call that arguments. Okay, yeah, call that arguments. Okay, so I want you to understand that in JavaScript, when you create a function, by default, there's this invisible, argument item, that can actually collect all the arguments that was passed into that function, right? So just note this. Now, don't write a function and work with arguments without using or without indicating that you're expecting arguments, right? Even if it's possible, please don't do that. Okay. If I use this argument item, I can actually grab all the arguments. So I can simply say return argument 0 plus argument 1, right? So let's see, argument 1. Can I do that? This is probably not going to work because the argument itself is not an array, is it? Oh, it worked. Okay. Okay. So I was able to get, so I was able to fetch this item, which is 0 and 1. Okay. So because when I do this, it's actually, taking the property, right? So 0 here is describing the property, not necessarily the index, right? Does that mean I can say dot 0? Okay, I cannot do that. So I can actually use this. Please don't do this. Yeah, don't do this. I don't think it's a good idea to work with arguments that you did not describe here, except you're building command line applications or something, right? But if you're working with, if you're building a project, I think it's a good idea to describe, what you are expecting to have. So, for example, if you're working with a function and you expect that function to pull a record from the internet and print that record, you want to specify that when I call this function, I want to pass in a value, right? It can be like I want to pass in the first name. Let's call this greeting, for example, greeting. So whenever I call the first function, I want to take the first name and I want to also take the time of the day. So we can call it TOF or time of day. I actually prefer name your variables properly, even though it looks so long. Of course, not extremely long, but it's better than saying TOF, right? I know that this means time of the day, but you will not know that this means time of the day, right? Time of the day, yeah. So time of the day. So I know that this means time of the day, but you will not necessarily know that this is time of the day. So instead, I'll prefer to say time of day, right? So if I am calling this, I basically want to return the greeting. So I can say, let's say good, then I can put in the time of the day, just like this, time of the day with a comma, and I can put the first name, right? So first name, plus put this as well. So if I call this and I simply say greeting, and I say the name of this person is Modulus, and the time of the day is morning, right? So morning, or afternoon. If I run this, I'm expecting to see good morning, Modulus, right? Or good afternoon, Modulus, right? So that is the point. Make sure you specify. If you're expecting item, if you don't know what you're expecting, I personally don't think it's a good way to build a project where you are calling an argument, but you don't necessarily know what you're expecting. But there are scenarios where you can just iterate over the list of items, right? So imagine we say we want to write a function that can add, we want to write a function that can add numbers together, right? We don't know what the numbers would be, but we just want to write a function that would add those numbers together. Yeah, there are ways to actually do something like that. A very simple way would be to say you have a function sum all, and you don't know what you're expecting here, right? It might be more than you expect to see. So I can call sum all, and within sum all, I can put an array of items to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Now within the sum all function, I can simply just first off, let's see our argument, right? So let's return arguments. Run this. Of course, we have an error. So let's see, where is our error coming from? Okay, so it says missing, something is missing somewhere. So yeah, right here. So let's run that again. So now you see, we have all our arguments. First off, it's actually within a single index or a single property, which is .0, right? So which means we can actually say we want to grab everything in the 0 item, and now you see we have all the items, right? And when you have all the items, the next thing you might want to do is to say, let's call this args equals this. So let's args equals this, and then we can say let total equals 0. We just want to initialize that. And the next thing we can actually do is to say maybe for, yeah, we can actually use it for each. I just want to use a regular for loop. So I'm going to say for let I equals 0, and I'm going to say our arguments, right, our args. So I'm going to say I is less than args dot length, right? Length. That's the right spelling for the length. So I plus plus. So what I want to do is to first print out this item, just to see. I'm going to say the log. I'm going to say args and I. right? So I'm going to just run this and see what happens. I think I forgot to, yeah, turn this off. So we got the value of undefined, even though we wanted to log this. This was not logged properly. So let's see. I'm going to save this again. Now you see we're able to log it now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So now that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what you could actually do is to always, add the value of total. So we can say total equals equals total plus the value, right? Plus the value. So this would always increase, and maybe when you're done, you can return total, right? This is a very, of course, lengthy way to do this. You can make it shorter, but if we run this this time around, the idea is we're going to see total of the values in here, which is 15. So 5 plus 4. So of course, that's what we're doing here, right? Yeah, and if you even have like more items like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's still going to work. So we have this in a single array, right? And we are just grabbing the item of the array. Even if you don't have this in a single array, you can definitely wrap it inside an array and perform your computation, or you can grab the items from the arguments directly without having to grab it from a single using a single property or key, right? So it is possible, but I don't think I would like to do this. I would instead specify what I am expecting, right? Um, so except for some few scenarios where you need to do this, I think especially when you're doing data structure and algorithm, you'll definitely get to do something like this. But yeah, I believe you get the point, right? You get the point. So we're working with the function now. This function is basically, adding every single item that comes in from this array. We're not very sure what the number would be, so but we just added it into a single array. If you don't have this in an array, then of course, can you still work with this? Is it possible? Yeah, I mean, it is. It is, very possible. All you have to do is to, of course, get every single item that you expect to have in here. So let's try something. I can simply say we have arguments. Okay, let's do this. And say let args equals this. So I'm going to simply, return args just to see what we have this time around. So yeah, so what I did here was we did not, but initially we did not put this in any array, but I was able to use this item to populate an array, from the arguments. Very simple, JavaScript implemented. We have this in JavaScript. You can simply use this to populate all the items into your array, right? So which means our code will still work perfectly. All we have to do is do this, right? And if I run this again, okay, now this is wrong. I have to say total, right? If I run this again, it's basically going to sum every single item in here. That was not in an array. The only time this would break, of course, is when you then add John, right? So let's see what happens. So it says 55 John. Come on, this is crazy. Okay, so I believe you get the point, right? Working with your function where we just have like a single expectation, right, from that function. It makes sense. If you want to do multiple things, please separate them into multiple functions. And now we're using the regular function. At what point will you use the arrow function? I think it depends. If you want to use, if you want a function right within your computation, you just want a function that can do something and always return the value. You can definitely use an arrow function. If you're working with an object and you use an arrow function, now this is the difference, and I want you to take note of this. So let's take this object for example. I'm simply going to call this object. I'm going to say arrow function being an object. Okay. So we have this object, and this object I'll call it let student. Equals this. So now we have a student, and we're adding a function. I will call this function. Let's say, let's call this fee. Kind of like school fee or something. So get tax. I don't know if you pay tax on your school fee, but yeah, let's just say get tax. This should be camel case. So this is the first thing I explained to you earlier. So you can use this function, of course, right? So this is the first pattern that we used earlier. This time around, I want us to use the arrow function this way. So, right now, here's the thing: if I simply say I want to return, the fee, and I use this dot fee, and then I say times 10 divided by 100. Now, if I call the student dot gets tax, and I probably want to print this, right? If I call this, let's do that. You see, it tells me not a number, right? I mean, why are we saying not a number? Now, I think the major thing you should understand is when you're using this, this within this item is not going to reference this, right? It's not going to do the work, unlike when we used this here, right? So we're able to fetch the same item using this.make. Unfortunately, when you are using an arrow function like this, you just want to call fee, right? So fee is going to call this, not this.fee. So please take note of that. If I call this right now, so let's see, we have an error. What exactly does it say? So it says fee is not defined. Okay, so fee is not defined. Okay, did I make a mistake somewhere? Oh, yeah, I think I figured this. So let's do this again. I'm going to verify this. So when I say this.fee, oh boy, let's see, this.fee, and I said times 10 divided by 100. Student dot get tax. So we have not a number. Okay, so what if we say console.log fee? Okay, so we have undefined. Let me see this here. Okay, so I think there's a mix up here. I would want to check where I am making the mistake. If you figure out the mistake, please point it out. I am definitely making a mistake there. So give me a minute to fix it. All right, let's see. I think my internet was disconnected right here. Okay, so please, if you're able to point that out, please do. So we want to access we want to access the fee item, but we're using the arrow function. So, the thing is, fee right now is, fee would actually work perfectly if you then have like a fee, item here, right? If you have like let fee, equals a new number, but we want to access that fee item we have right there. So, I'm just doing some Googling right now. So a JS object with arrow function. Okay. Okay, so I think I get it. You basically want to JS objects. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to try the student.c just to see if that solves the problem. Right. Okay, so that works. Okay, so yeah, working with this, I was unable to fetch the record using this because it was referring to like the scope right here, the scope of the function itself. And of course, if you're using the scope of the function itself and you run this, there's no fee item in here. Now, assuming you have fee here, right? Or you probably have like this like let fee, and of course you can actually reference fee. But when you don't have that, item, you definitely will have to reference the object itself, which in my case, I'm just saying the student.fee, right? And I was able to reference that number. So all I have to do now is multiply by 10 and divide by 100. So if I run this, we're able to get 60,000, which is what we expect to have. So yeah, I think that was the mistake. Okay, so please take note of that, right? Take note of that when you're trying to reference this item. If you choose, so if you try to reference it this way as well, it's going to tell you that there's an error. You don't have fee because you did not define fee right within the arrow function, right? If you have fee in here, and maybe you put in a you pass in a value, right? You pass in a value, then of course that makes sense, right? Because you can simply call fee and right here you can pass in the student.fee or maybe something else, maybe like a different number, right? You can pass in a different number, such as 100,000. So if you're using this, then of course that would work. But if you want to use the same item in here, you have to reference it, with the item itself, student.fee. So before you can get your value, else it will tell you fee was not defined. Or if you use this, then it tells you it is not a number, which is NaN. That is the error we saw earlier, NaN. All right. So if you have any issues, I mean, feel free, search online and try to figure it out. But if you cannot, solve that. So the thing is, when I use this.fee, if I have an item called fee right on top here, so let's see if that works. If I use let's fee falls maybe like 100,000. So even though I have 600,000 here, when I say this.fee and I run this, so this still gives me not a number, which means even though it is using the global this, it is probably unable to fetch this specific record, right? So I could not access that as well. So I will stick to the student.fee, to fetch that record. Yeah, so and that is our arrow function. This was the regular function right on top of it. Um, where is the regular function? So we have the regular function, yeah, right here. So yeah, and you can also have a function within the object, but I would prefer that when you learn how to work with a class in the second class that you have this evening, you can then define a proper class that has object oriented patterns, and you can also implement what we call methods instead of a function. So you have the when you have a function within a class, it is referred to as a method, right? So you can then create methods and work with those methods. All right, so please make sure you attend that class this evening so you can learn how to do that because it will be very interesting as well. Thanks, guys. If you have any question, drop it in the chat before we end the session. We're already 7 minutes late. I apologize for that. Okay, so drop your questions in the chat if there are any questions, maybe in the next 3 minutes. And the form is already shared, so please ensure you also fill the form for your attendance. All right, Amaka, I think that is all from my end. Thank you.
All right, Mav. Thank you so much for a wonderful session. So, guys, there are no questions here. Doesn't mean that you understand everything. I think you do. All right, guys. So, I would say follow us on. Okay, follow us on Twitch and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you guys by 8 p.m. Watt tonight. Bye, everyone.